There's the girl in all her beauty, set up on the turbo, my training rig, and it's time to get her ready. Now, what with race season very much upon us, in fact, I think I've got less than 10 weeks before the first race. It's time to get this thing ready, but there are some adjustments I've made of it. Now, I don't know if you can notice what they are, but in this video, I'm going to aim to take you through what they are. A big welcome back, everyone. Now, last year over on my channel, I put a video out on how you adjust the Canyon Speedmax headset and cockpit. Now, there's a couple of reasons I did that. Well, firstly, I was looking around for videos myself on how to do it. I couldn't find any. So I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to go alone on this, I might as well put a video out because it might help someone in a similar position as to what I was in. So after racing in this setup all season, we fast forward a number of months, and here I am again doing some more adjustments. Now you may be asking why. Well, last year was my first year on the new bike, and yeah, I was tinkering around with the position on it. I hadn't had a bike fit last year on it. I've had loads of bike fits previously. So I kind of knew my position, and what I was trying to do was replicate my previous bike position as best as I could. Now, I didn't quite get there with the top end, but I knew that was going to be a bit of trial and error. So here I am with some new parts from Canyon, and I'm tinkering around with the cockpit end again. So the question is, what do we have in the box delivered by Canyon? Right, let's crack this baby open. See what we have. And try not to cut myself. Right, so in the box we have two things. First up, we've got the extension angle spacer. So you'll see here this goes on the end of the bars, just so that I can angle the bars up, give me a little bit of extra comfort, as well as obviously increasing my reach. So there's the Speedmax extension angle spacer kit. And then the second one, I did cut myself here. The second one, you'll see that I've bought the arm pads, okay, the extra armrest pads, because yeah, it's just to give me, again, a little bit more comfort. I'll talk through those as we look at them in a bit more detail. Inside the angle spacer kit, you have your angle spacers, which are varying degrees. And then you've got the different length bolts that attach to whichever base bar you use. Right, let's move on to fitting this thing. Now, the first thing that we have to do is remove the hydration straw. So I'm taking the top cap off here, which is just easily clipped in, and that just pulls off. Just be careful that you don't snap it, and then you can remove the straw like so. Now, the next job is to remove the plastic capping, which is just on the bottom of the base bar. And you'll see there's a really small screw just underneath here, and this hides all of the cabling for the Di2. So just be careful you don't lose that screw as you take it out. And the next bit is quite tricky, pulling the sort of plastic capping out. You have to be quite forceful with it. I find that if you can just push it forward towards the saddle and then pull it up, it should just pop out quite easily, and then you'll see all the cabling just underneath. It's a good idea at this point to remember where and how these cables go. So take a photo or do something like that. I've done this a few times, so I do remember, but we're trying to access the two silver bolts that you can see at the top, because these will loosen the bars completely off. At this point, it is a good idea to consult your manual or your instructions to think about the configuration that you're going to use. It will tell you the bolts and spacers and the combinations you have. And here you can see my current configuration: a large spacer, small spacer, and then a small angle spacer. So I'm aiming to increase that slightly. And again, by consulting the instructions, there are so many variations that you can use, so you've just got to think about which one you want to go and try and follow the instructions with the amount of spacers and everything that you need. Right, we now come to loosening off those two bolts that we saw in the previous clip, and here you can see I'm using the hex bolt to do that. I don't know what size it is, I can't remember, but they come off pretty pretty quickly. And as you loosen them, you'll see the extension bars becoming very, very loose. And as soon as those bolts are completely out, the bars will come off. And again, good practice when you're taking out all of these bolts is remembering what you've used, where it goes, and keeping it all safe. So here you can see the bars are completely released. Those two large bolts actually clamp everything down, so your extension and your armrest, and there are some washers inside, so don't lose those as well. Put them safely aside, and here you can see the whole assembly is pretty much taken apart now. Now, as you're taking this apart, you'll see here I'm just being careful because there are some assembly pins. They're really tiny pieces of metal that fit into the base bars to help line everything up, and they just become loose. So it's really important that you collect all of those and make sure that you don't lose them. You do get spare ones, so worst case scenario, you can use the spares in the box. Right, we come on to the setup, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this space bar in place, but I am going to replace the spacer, and this one is going to go on top of it, and then I'm going to use the old spacer on top of the new spacer, which should give me a little bit of extra height, a little bit more angle, and I think it's going to be around 13.5 degrees. Right, let's get on to fitting this thing, and you can see here I'm loosening the bolts to the base bar attachment, and the reason for this is because the bolts are actually not long enough to fit that base bar piece as well as the angle riser. You'll see I've just taken off the assembly pins as well, so all I'm doing is swapping out the bolts here for longer versions which you get in the extension kit. Right, let's get putting this actually on now. You can see I'm being really careful here because I've put the assembly pins in, and it's important to line up the holes to them so that it all sort of locks together. Now I'm going to take the longer bolts as well as the new spacer. So I'm placing the spacer on top, as you can see, and then getting those longer bolts right down, and that will clip into the base, or tighten into the base bar. Now, one thing I would advise is use a torque wrench and go with the torque guidance that Canyon give you. I'm only just putting these in at the moment. I'm not tightening them too much, but I will go over it with a torque wrench after, just to make sure that everything is correct. Then we come on to add in the final angle riser, and you can see I've just put in the assembly pins again in to help line everything up. And then I'm going to drop the angle riser on top, and you can see it gives me that extra little bit. Now again, you've got to fiddle about with the type of bolts to use, what length you use here, and I think I went for the 35 mils because those two spacers need to lock together. And then we go with some more assembly pins, and then you can see I'm putting the arm bars on, or the armrest pads on. And then again, don't forget any of the washers that were included in that part. And I'm just moving here the extension bars out of the way. This will allow you to drop any more assembly pins in, as you can see. And then I'm going to bring the extension bars back into place and put them on top of the angle spacers that I've used. So you can see here I'm fiddling around to try and get the assembly pins aligned up, because once they're aligned up, it should just hold into place like so. Now that we've got everything aligned, it's a matter of getting the bolts in to clamp it all down. So again, like I said, you've got to have the right size bolts here, and I think I went for 35s. They seem to fit the best. And you can see I'm just holding it together. I'm getting my hex key just down there and just tighten it lightly to begin with. And then eventually we will tighten it all down together. So that's pretty much stage one done, and I quickly just jumped on the bike just to give it a feel as to how those bars were like. I wouldn't really know until I started training on it and riding on it, but just a quick check. Then we come to the Canyon Speedmax Armrest upgrade kit. Now in this box you get a couple of things. First up, you get your actual soft armrest pads, and they're in that box. And then next up is, well, there's a Garmin mount in here actually as well, which I didn't realise you get, because I do already have a Canyon Garmin mount, but there are wings on it, and I'll show you what those do eventually. And then inside the box you've got also a Wahoo or a Garmin mount, and then I think this box you have the actual armrest pads. And the instructions show you the two configurations you can have, so you can carry on with the normal pads that you've got and add two extras, or you can go with just the longer one complete pad system, which is the one that I'm going to use for this upgrade. So the first job is to attach the two wings to the Garmin mount. Now, if you haven't got a Garmin mount, you would have to assemble the whole thing, but I already had one. So in this case, it was just a matter of me attaching the mounts or the wings to the mount with the supplied hex bolts. Quite a quick and easy job to do. I then move on to removing the armrest pads, and they are just velcroed on. You do have to be careful because they are glued down really tight, so if you pull them at the wrong angle you'll pull off the glue and the velcro underneath. But once you've done that, you will reveal the bolts underneath, which the armrests are attached to the bars. It is then just a case of releasing those bolts, untightening them, and then your armrests will become free from the tri-bars. The next job really was for me to attach the new armrest pads, but before I did that I had to extend my bars outwards, or the tri-bars out, and that's the beauty with the Canyon setup. It's quite adjustable. There are two bolts on the top. One of them was hidden behind the Garmin mount, so I had to loosen that off so I could move it out of the way. But once those bolts are loose, the tri-bars are able to extend a bit further out. So as you can see here, I was taking the armrest pad, trying to put it into the position that I wanted it, just to measure up where I needed to extend my bars to. And once I had that in place, it was just a matter of really clamping everything down with the supplied bolts. Right, so there is a little bit of guesswork here. I'm just placing them in. I'm actually likely to move these again. And now that I've actually ridden the bike a few times in training, I'm considering moving the angle pads just a bit wider outside where they are currently. So finally, once you've got these bolts in place and the arm pads set up, again I would recommend using a torque wrench here, but I'm not actually tightening them too much because I'm like I said, I'm likely to fiddle with this again. So the last thing to do is fit the armrest pads, and it's a matter of lining those up. They're velcroed in again, but it's very strong velcro. So placing them in and sticking them down, and that's pretty much it. The final job was to put the last bits and pieces back together. Now you can see I'm moving on to the straw here, and I didn't actually film me putting the cables back in and the cable housing, but you do have to do that first, and that has to be all secured with that little screw that we removed at the beginning. You can see me here adjusting my straw again, so I'm really adjusting the magnetic clips because where I've extended the bars, obviously the clip didn't quite reach it, so I've just pulled that up. But then the straw will go back in, and then the last thing to do will be to replace the cap on the bottom. You can see there I was just lining it up, and then the top cap can go back on, and it's finally all in position. So there you have it, everyone. There's the new cockpit setup, and that's a video really for all you Canyon nerds out there. You can come on and tell me what I did wrong, but like I said, I'm still playing with it, so there are still some adjustments that I've made. I've 3 rides on it so far. It's much better, it's much more comfortable, which is what I wanted. I then wanted a bit more arm contact, which I've got. So overall, I'm happy with it. I've still got to fiddle with it a little bit, and I've got about 10 weeks or so to get used to riding in the bars again. So I hope you've enjoyed that one. If you're new around here, do hit the sub button. It is always appreciated, and I'll be back very soon.